Competitors are becoming amateur gunsmiths in the quest to shave a tenth of a second here or gain a couple of extra positions in a match. People are altering the internal workings of their firearms without fully comprehending the consequences. But what happens when you've done too many tweaks or removed just a little too much? Or worse, what happens if you sell that gun and don't tell the other party that you believe yourself to be a competent gunsmith and have done internal modifications? The following is what could happen. On May 14th, 2016, I was in Ben Steger's USPSA Skills and Drills class. It was the first day of classes and I was pumped to be there. The morning was rough. I was having a lot of jams in my firearms, but nothing to cause any concern, either with myself, my other classmates, or Ben. I had previously run less than 100 rounds through the gun, but I had bought it used and was assured it was in tip-top shape. The previous owner had also been a USPSA competitor and told me he had no issues with it. I continued to have issues after lunch, and Ben offered to look at it after class. I had given the firearm a quick cleaning before heading out to the range. Not a thorough breakdown nook and cranny cleaning, but a once-over. We all know that's bad juju to do before doing something big, and I figured that was it. Or maybe the ammo. Unfortunately, we never got a chance to test those theories. I stood in the make-ready box, hands slightly forward, facing the first target, and started singing You Are My Sunshine in my head. I remember hearing the buzzer and the gunshot simultaneously. There were people on the other bay, and I believe that they had fired the shot. Fellow competitors that day told me I swayed a little bit, but I gave no obvious indication that something was wrong. The RO asked if my gun went off, and I replied no. The RO asked for a second time, did your gun go off? And I again replied no. But something made me look down. There, almost directly behind my knee, was a perfect circle in my blue jeans. Things started happening in rapid succession. I owe my life to the individuals at the range that day. No panic, no chaos, just a well-orchestrated group of people all striving towards the common goal of keeping me alive. Luckily, one of the guys had a tourniquet and applied it to my leg. Even more fortunate, the small town I was in had an ambulance and they were there within 10 minutes. There was really no pain. I was completely level-headed and started stating my allergies, my medications, previous medical history, passcode to my vehicle, took the lock feature off my phone and sent my mom a text message. 911, shot in leg, not joking, Bismarck transport. As a side note, I would not recommend telling your family members you're shot via text message. I looked down and could see the entrance wound. I remember thinking, well, hell, I'm not bleeding that bad. About that time, someone removed my shoe and the blood poured out of my shoe. I'm not exaggerating. The bullet had exited my ankle at the posterior tibial artery. I was screwed. As they removed my sock, I actually thought the white of the sock was my foot and I had amputated my foot. That's when panic started to set in. Then I became really mad. What had happened? I wanted answers. I started asking the people around me what had happened. I knew I hadn't grabbed my gun. The draw has always been my weakest link, and I actually normally don't unholster until I'm at the first target for fear of tripping and dropping the firearm. No one had any answers. I was loaded into the ambulance and spent the next 90 minutes riding in that ambulance to the nearest level 2 trauma center. Some people have called it a miracle. Others say I'm one hell of a shot. Either way, the round entered laterally below my knee, traveled completely through my leg before exiting medially at the ankle. It missed all of the bones in my leg, ankle, and foot. It destroyed 90% of my calf muscle, most of the ligaments and tendons in my ankle, nicked the posterior tibial artery, and obliterated most of the nerves in my leg. After less than 3 hours in the emergency room, I was back on the road for another 90-minute drive, this time heading home. By Tuesday, I was still weak and my leg looked horrible. The pain was excruciating, so my mom called a local doctor to see if I could be seen on short notice. I expected to go into the office, get some antibiotics, and head home. Boy, was I wrong. I hobbled into the office, and the doctor came in looking very stoic. He had bad news. I had developed severe compartment syndrome in my leg, and it needed immediate attention. They had called the hospital and notified them I was coming. They also notified the orthopedic surgeon about a likely fasciotomy and possible amputation. How did I go from 2 tiny holes in my leg to possible amputation? I spent the next week in the hospital with my leg elevated around the clock. I couldn't get up at all. If I lowered my leg and the swelling started to increase, I would more than likely lose my leg. I became the model patient. After a week, the danger had passed from the compartment syndrome and I was allowed to go home. However, this wasn't the end of the journey. I spent the next month in a wheelchair, then graduated to a walker, then to crutches, and finally a cane. No one knows the recovery time for such an injury. Neurologists state that it could take 30 months for the nerves to regenerate, if they're going to at all. My calf muscle was essentially shredded. What's left is not securely attached to the bones, so I have to be careful not to rip it. The ligaments and tendons that control my ankle and foot are damaged beyond repair. I have minimal voluntary ankle movement. Due to the lack of ligaments and tendons, my foot has slowly been twisting downward and inward. Think clubfoot. I've also developed tarsal tunnel syndrome from the compartment syndrome and where the bullet exited. My ankle has no stability. I have extremely limited movement at the joint and almost no feeling from mid-calf down. An AFO brace is a standard part of my wardrobe. I walk with a limp, and on bad days I have to use a cane. My entire life was turned upside down in a split second. So how did this happen? Immediately following the accident, I reached out to several firearm experts to get their thoughts and opinions on the matter. Mark Pasamanek was instrumental in diagnosing what likely happened. While there's no video of the accident, we had several first-hand accounts, the time on the timer, and the firearm itself. First, several individuals confirmed I had not grabbed my gun. Second, the time on the timer registered 0.52 seconds. I'd been keeping a logbook that day of my draw and my first shot times. They were hovering between 2.5 and 3 seconds, and that was with my hands at my side. I know I'm not that fast, and the clock confirms it. That's barely enough time for me to flinch from the sound of the buzzer. Lastly, I completely disassembled my firearm, and that's where we found the likely source. The sear had been heavily modified. This prevented the internal safety from operating correctly, and it also made it easy for the trigger bar to slide past the sear. More than likely, there were other internal modifications, but I am in no means a firearms expert. I've decided to share my story because I'm hearing more and more people talk about doing their own gunsmithing and performing basement trigger jobs. Not only are you putting your life in danger, you're endangering other people at the range. And heaven forbid you decide to sell that firearm without disclosing the modifications. Let my accident be a lesson for everyone. Unless you have been trained, taken classes, or considered a professional firearms expert, you should not be doing your own modifications. Yes, it may seem easy. A little polish here, a little filing there, but do you know when to stop? Do you know when a little becomes too much? Or how all the internal workings actually interact? For every action, there's an opposite but equal reaction. This accident has left me permanently impaired. I have a noticeable limp and am confined to a knee-down leg brace. My hope is to spread awareness about do-it-yourself gunsmithing. The consequences are real, and they could be deadly, but they are, at the very least, life-altering. I will continue to compete in shooting sports. It's one of my passions and my hobbies. I may be a little bit slower and more awkward, but it hasn't diminished my ability to be a good ambassador for the sport. If you see me at a match, come over and say hello. I enjoy meeting new people and love talking about the shooting sports. And if you know someone who is doing their own gunsmithing, please share this video with them. In fact, share this video as much as possible. Our sport is incredibly safe, and I'd like to keep it that way. With the influx of new competitors and the ability of how-to documents on the internet, the possibility of another incident like this has significantly increased. More than anything, I want to raise awareness about the issue, get competitors talking, and critically thinking about it. We've got to look out for each other and continue to provide a safe and positive environment for competitors. And I hope to see you out at the range.